Hello, welcome back. This is the second video in a series where I'm building out a Notion template for project management, task management, and goal tracking. I'm not going to do the whole explanation again of why I'm coming back to Notion, what I'm trying to build, blah blah blah. If you're coming into this video without context, you might want to go watch the first one because we're going to get right into it. In the last video, we set up a couple of databases, most notably the start of our task database that supports a simple form of recurring tasks. In this one, we're going to work on setting up time tracking that makes use of the new database property buttons. And we are also going to set up some databases that will allow us to track metrics related to our work and also set goals for those metrics over a certain time frame. So getting right into it, we're going to start on our tasks database. And time tracking is something I've tried to get working in the past, but it was a little bit too tedious. And I think with the new database buttons, I will be able to automate it enough that it won't be unbearable. That being said, I may not ever use this, but we're going to try it out and see how it goes. This will work in a similar way to the task history, but instead of tracking just a completion date, we will track a start time and an end time. We'll use a database button on the tasks to create the time log and set the start time. And then on the time log database, we will have another button which will effectively stop the timer by setting an end time. So we'll create a new database, time logs. These are pretty simple. Start time, end time, both date properties. And then we have a fairly simple formula to get the total minutes. We use date between, pass in the end time and then the start time, and then the word minutes to have that number in minutes. And I just picked minutes because I think it'll be the easiest for me to work with. And then we have two more properties to add to this database. The first is a relation to connect these time logs to the tasks, and then the button. The button will simply set the end time to now. And it's important to use now and not today, or it won't have the time on it as well, it will just have the date. Now, going back to the tasks database, here we can add a second button, the button to actually create the time logs and add the start time when we create it. So this will be similar to the task history. We have the button create a page in the time logs database, setting the task property to this page, and then the start time to now. Easy. Now we can start the time log from this task, and this creates it. In the time logs database, then we can stop it. And once we start putting together templates and dashboards, I'm going to make sure we have a way of seeing active time logs so that they can be easily stopped and don't get lost. Of course, just like with the task history, if you forget to press stop when you're actually done, you can always press it later and then edit the end time manually to get it to the right time. And I realized I never connected the tasks and projects up to the life tracks, so I've just gone and done that really quick. And now we're going to start on one more set of databases for something I've added in various forms in the past. I've used different approaches, and I have another approach this time, hoping that this is the thing that makes it something I can really use. So I want the ability to track metrics, numbers that represent how things are progressing. In a practical sense, I mean tracking engagement on social media projects, tracking income on self-employment, tracking body metrics related to health goals, things like that. And the way I'm doing this is having a separate database for the metric definition, and then also for the metric entries and for the goals. The metric type database is the first one, and this will basically define what a metric is and collect all the entries and connect to the goals and things like that. I have a couple of other things to set up before we can really make use of this database, so we'll be back here later. Next, we create a database for the metric entry. This is the individual entries. It's going to have a date for when this metric was tracked, an amount for the value of what it is, and then a relation to that metric type. And then I realized I forgot a property I wanted on metric type, a text property to represent the units of this metric so that when I'm displaying these later, they can have relevant descriptions. So if this is a metric for YouTube views, I would put views in here. If it's a metric for, pages read, I would put pages. Last, for the metrics, I need one more database for metric goals. Making them separate database items from the metrics themselves means I can track continuous progress on things, so I can set specific goals for a given week, a given month, a given quarter, and nothing is going to clash with anything else. So the metric goals have a date property which will have the start and end date. It'll be a date range, and this is the time frame that I want to achieve this goal in. It'll have a target number as well. This is the amount I'm aiming for. And I'm also going to add some options here as select property, and this is going to be whether we sum these metrics, we average them, or we take the latest value. And this is because some metrics are naturally cumulative. For example, if I want to read 20 books over the course of a quarter, I can add a book here, add a book there. We add them all up, and that's how close I am to that goal. If I want to achieve a certain number of YouTube subscribers, this is going to be the easiest to put in just as a total each time I track it, so we will want to take the last value or the latest value. Next, I need to connect this up to the metric type with a relation property. And we've made relation properties before, it's easy for us at this point. Next, I want a text display that will show what this goal is in a short sentence. I'm a big fan of using formulas to format information into something that's going to make building dashboards much easier, and it's going to make the information much more useful. So this will be a formula property. I'll start with the target amount. I will add a space between, and then I will use the relation to metric type. Get the first result. There should only be one, but I didn't specifically limit this on the relation property. We're going to use that metric type to get the units text field that we set up. And then we will do the word by, and then the goal date, but just the end of the goal date, so we'll use date end. And so we can see we want to get X units by date. Next, I want to make a formula that will get all the metric values attached to this goal type within the goal date range. And before I built this out, I wasn't really sure if it would work, but it turns out the Formulas 2.0 is really powerful, and it worked perfectly. And I didn't prepare this formula in advance like I did some of the other ones, so I had to kind of feel it out and go back and forth. So the footage might not be as straightforward as some of the others, but here is how this formula works. We start by defining a variable, all amounts, which gets all the metric amounts that fall within this date range. And the way we do that is we start with the metric type relation, the first value, and then from that we get the metric entry relation, which is a list of all the entries related to that metric type. We do a sort with current.date as the sort value, and then we filter, and this filter uses the date as well to make sure it's either on or after the start date and on or before the end date. Then we map this list to the amounts. So at the end of this set of functions, in the all amounts variable, we have a list of amounts, and all of these amounts are between the goal date. Based on the goal type, we have some different calculations we need to do, so we have a couple of if statements here. First, if goal type is average, we must first sum all the amounts, and I found out there is a sum option on the list, but you have to make sure that the list is a list of numbers or it simply won't show up. And then we divide it by all amounts.length. If goal type is sum, we simply sum the amounts. And then if goal type is last, we just want to grab the last value, which only works because we did that sort by date when we were building up this list. And then if it doesn't have a goal type, we just return an empty string at the end because we just don't have enough information on what we should return without that goal type. Also, I noticed I put latest in the select value instead of last, so I had to go back and fix that in some of my formulas. But if you saw the wrong text in there, I did fix it. And then since I have this value, I can make a progress bar based on the progress towards the target amount. The way to do this is to do the current amount, which is the metric total, divided by the target amount. And then a little trick to round numbers in Notion is to first multiply all of this by 100, round that number, and then divide it by 100 again, and it will get rid of additional decimal points. If you change out 100 for 1,000, you will then get 1 decimal point, and you can just keep increasing the number of zeros if you want a really precise number. And you'll see getting this metric formula to get all these metric values is actually really easy, and it's entirely because of the 2.0 formulas update, being able to do proper queries on these relations, filtering the values, doing all of this in code is so nice, and it's easy once you learn how to do it. It can be a little bit confusing before you learn how to do it, but once you've sort of unlocked the power of these list functions, you can really do a lot with Notion with some of the updates that they've done. Now we are basically done with the data structure for this Notion template. The next thing is to start working on the layout, the display, making it easy to both enter values into the template and also get them back out in a way that makes sense to you. But in order to start building things out, we are going to need a few more properties, and these are going to be properties that I call display properties, which are really just built out to display things in a certain way. They don't calculate anything necessarily. First, I'm adding a formula that is originally adapted from a Red Gregory post. Highly recommend Red Gregory for Notion stuff. They are extremely knowledgeable and entertaining as well. So this is a formula that gets the percentage that you are through a date range. And so I've edited this formula a few times, and then I've also adapted it to the Formulas 2.0 update, so it looks very different at this point from the original post, but the idea is the same. The first thing we do is define a variable for the percentage. I'm going to use this later to constrain it between 0 and 100%. Within that let, we do another let where we define two variables. Now to start is the hours between now and the start of the date range, so we can figure out how far in we are. And with that, we do date between, now, goal date dot date start, and hours. Then we have hours range, which is the hours between the start and end of the goal date. So we're going to do something very similar. Date between, goal date dot date end, goal date dot date start, and then hours. And then after we have those variables defined, we have some conditionals. I actually noticed I could simplify this a little bit. Here, if now to start is greater than 0, we know that now is after the start date, so then we can use now to start divided by hours range to figure out how many hours in we are to the total hours. This is the progress that we've made through this date range. I multiply this by 100, round it, divide it by 100 to get that rounded up percentage. Then on the other side of the if statement, if now to start is less than 0, then that means we haven't entered this date range yet, so we would just return 0. And then the original let that we did, the percentage value, will either be a percentage or it'll be 0. And because it can be greater than 100% still, we want to do another if. If percentage is less than or equal to 1, return the percentage. Otherwise, return 1, and this is because 1 is 100%, and we don't want to go over 100%. So now we have the percentage of time we are through the date range of this goal. And I'm going to make this a progress bar by clicking on the property and changing the progress settings and changing the display settings there. And as I change the date range to test out this percentage formula, we are including different metrics in that count, which is why the progress is also changing. So don't worry about that. I'm also going to change the date progress bar so that it's gray, it stands out a little bit less. And when you see these progress bars side by side, you can compare whether your goal is currently on track. And in fact, I'm going to add another display formula that will show us whether we are behind our goals or if we are on track. This formula is quite simple since we're calculating everything already. If the goal progress is at least as high as the date progress, we are on track. Doing a true or false here gives us this checkbox. We could also return a formatted string if we want to, but I think I'm going to actually do something a little bit more fun. So the next thing I'm going to do is add ASCII-based progress bars. And the reason I'm using these instead of the Notion progress bars is because of some limitations in formatting. So to demonstrate, I'm going to first add a property up to the LifeTrack database. First, we need to make sure that the relation from metric type to LifeTracks is showing on the database. I think we need it to be showing in order to use it in a formula. We do the same thing to get the metric goal showing up on metric type. So the end goal is to get all these progress bars for goals attached to a certain LifeTrack showing on a dashboard. So for this, we will do a new formula property. We will do a map on the metric types, and then a map on the contained metric goals to get the progress of each goal. Once we added a goal so we can actually see the progress that we've got here, you'll notice the progress bars just kind of pile up in the table here, and that's not really what I want. And this happens on gallery cards, it happens on the board. They don't separate the progress bars in a way that I think is visually appealing. What I really want to be able to do is have each progress bar show on its own line, but if I add text to these values, including new lines, they no longer show up as progress bars, they show up as just numbers. So the solution is using the old ASCII progress bars that we know and love from original Notion. Before they had the built-in progress bars, everyone was using these. And the way that this formula works is it basically splits two strings. Each of the strings has 10 characters in it, and one has empty characters, or like characters to represent an empty bar, and then the other one has 10 full characters. So you split based on that percentage, you get, 30% of the full characters, and then you get the rest of it from the empty characters, and you just add them together. I'm using floor here instead of round because I want 25% to show as 2 dots instead of 3. You can do it however you like. I also went back and formatted the date so it was a little bit shorter, a little bit more readable. And for the actual characters you use for the progress bar, you can pick whatever you like. I kept going back and forth on which ones I thought looked good. I think I landed on these slanted squares, but I keep changing my mind. I think I swapped out the characters here like 3 or 4 different times during this build. But ultimately it doesn't matter. You pick whatever looks good to you. Now the really fun part is that since these ASCII progress bars are technically text characters, they can be styled using the style function, and you can change the color. So what I wanted to do, which I thought was really fun, is using the on-track value, we can actually color code the progress bars based on whether they are on track or not. If we are on track, we can style with one color, and if we are not on track, we can style with a different color. And as I add metric entries, as I set the goal date, all of these will update in real time to show, how I'm doing, how far along these things are, whether I'm on schedule, whether I'm behind schedule. You can adjust these colors to be whatever you like, and I tested it out. You can even add an additional property, an additional text property, or potentially even a select to store a color for each option. So you could have them color coded based on what the goal is if you like to do that, and you just pass that property into the style function. But there it is, the template is really coming together now. This is where we're going to pause for this video. So we now have a pretty full-featured task system. We don't have a lot of the trimmings yet. You can't really look at these values very easily, but it does work. We have tasks that can be part of projects. They can be recurring by any number of days, weeks, or months. We can track time spent on these tasks. We can track metrics related to areas of our life and set goals for those metrics. And we have a few properties we can use as we start to build out the dashboard for this template. So that's what we're going to do in the next video. We're going to actually start building out the dashboard, making something that's cool to look at and useful. So don't forget to subscribe. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. because I'll be back soon with another video, specifically the next video in this Notion template building series. And I hope to see you there. Bye bye.